So when I was a little bit younger, I don't know, what was this? 7 years ago? 6 years ago? Guess, wow, something like 7 years ago. I was in training to become a social worker. I was doing a practicum as a kind of like the last piece of my graduate program, master's program. And I was working at this homeless, yes, it wasn't a shelter, it was a homelessness agency. I'm not sure the best way to describe it. It was and is, I assume, but it was a large, I think, nonprofit. Not exactly sure how they got their funding. This large agency, a large nonprofit that provided, like they had a big behavioral health component, which is what I was doing. Well, actually, I was doing a lot of different things there, but yeah, so you could get counseling, therapy, one on one, and they also did they had different groups. I guess I was running one of those groups. Um, and then, but yeah, they had outreach services. You'd go out to the, go out throughout the city basically and find people and try to interface and see what services they might need. And sometimes bring different supplies to them. What else did they do? They had this other component of their program. Forgive me, I'm not really getting the words right here, but this other, I guess, facet or other, I almost want to say department or branch, something like that. This other program that they had going on was working with severely mentally disabled people. Um, who were housed. Is that right? I'm trying to remember all this. Housed, but very at risk of becoming homeless and very in need of support. People with like schizophrenia and just uh, severe, other severe mental disabilities. I'm trying to remember some of this. It's kind of hard for me to remember everything. Can't remember what the criteria was for somebody who qualified for that program, but it was something like that. Just having severe challenges, major challenges, where you needed kind of like wraparound services, and you'd go out as part of the program, you'd part of the service that this nonprofit provided is you'd go out and you had like a clinical team, and you'd get visits, in-home visits, and they had a shuttle to bring folks in for different group. It wasn't really group therapy, maybe a little bit, but it was like, bring people in for different group art projects and just some social interaction. But yeah, a big part of it was going and doing these visits to where they lived and making sure that they were safe and checking on medications and things like that. So very and so I did a practicum at this place. Practicum is sort of like an internship. I think internship is a little bit of a pejorative, at least in the context of what I'm talking about here. Practicum, it's basically just, you're maybe something more like an apprenticeship or something. It's part of the graduate program. You have to complete 2 years worth, I guess, of practicum placement. I had another one prior to this for a year or 2 semesters at another agency. But and so at this placement, I was doing a bunch of different things. I was doing some one-on-one therapy with clients, and then I was running a group, and they kind of were having me just try out or get familiar with all the different services that they provide. So yeah, I can remember going out maybe just once, maybe more than once, I can't remember, on the sort of outreach around the city. And then there was a time when I was doing this, working with these very, forgive me, I can't quite remember the right terms here, but severely unwell people, severely mentally disordered. There's a whole terminology, and I'm not going to be able to get it right at this point, but yeah, it's like there was a clinical team that you'd meet and you'd discuss and you'd coordinate everything, and then during the week you'd go out and do these home visits. And anyways, I got kind of taken under one of the clinicians, this woman, young woman, or I think she was a little bit older than me, who worked in that home visiting program. She sort of took me under her wing. I mean, I guess I was sort of assigned to her. I don't know how it worked exactly, but she was a kind person. I mean, and helpful, and definitely could have been worse. She was somebody I could ask questions, and she was pretty patient. But one thing that I'm sort of grateful to her about, and probably not something she really intended, to be a takeaway, but at one point she said to me, I think we were going out on a home visit. Can't remember exactly when it happened, but somehow we were talking about the other staff and just the stress of the job, and like how do you manage dealing with this severity of uh, pain in the clientele, this severity of dysfunction, this severity. I mean, it's just a very intense population, I guess you could say, to work with, group of people to work with. Not the staff, but the clients. And I think we were talking about like how do you, maybe I even asked her, I can't remember, but like how do you guys cope with, interfacing with all this really difficult stuff? Yeah, and you just, man, I almost don't even want to try to relive or crack some of this open because you just see such really dire circumstances. I live in a somewhat of a big city, and something about the poverty and dysfunction and depths of human suffering and dysfunction in big cities, it just seems to be amplified. But, anyways, um, and so we were talking about that, and she said something really honest and kind of striking. And yeah, felt just kind of like a really naked, honest thing to say. And she said, in referring to the staff, she said, "Oh yeah, they're all stuffing." And I guess part of my consciousness was aware of that, but when you're in that practicum mode and you're kind of green to the whole setup, and you kind of have this maybe overly optimistic, overly rose colored in this case doesn't quite make sense. I was gonna say rose colored glasses, but you're just trying to see things in almost like an idealistic way. At least I think that was part of what was going on for me. But this was a really just kind of direct and honest thing, and I think maybe she started to list it out, or maybe I pieced it together. I'm not exactly sure, but you know, it was true, and she was in a better position to say something like that than I was because she had been working there for a while and knew the staff better than I did. But yeah, one of the clinicians, one of the guys, really nice guy, but he was a basically just a chain smoker. I mean, he smoked cigarettes a lot. One of the other ladies was just very, very overweight, so presumably stuffing in this case would, be overeating. This woman who I was with, she was very like kind of mm, neurotic. I don't know if that's fair, but just very like workaholic. And I think maybe the way she was coping with it was potentially a little bit healthier, but I think it was a lot of like excessive exercising. And I mean, I don't know. And again, it's been a number of years, so some of these details I'm not totally clear on. But it was like, as her just saying that kind of lifted a veil for me in a way that I didn't fully understand there. I had an inkling of what was going on, but it's taken a while for it to really percolate, throughout my consciousness. And it feels in retrospect like a bit of a pivot for me. At least, I mean, it's hard when you look back, you want to create like a simple narrative, and it's rarely that simple, but I think this is one of those tributary streams, or one of these little pivot points. Because yeah, it was like it was like I could see, looking around the room, at least in my mind's eye, of those staff meetings, the impact that that kind of work was having on the staff. And it was helpful for me too at that stage, because what was driving me at that point in my life, it's almost hard to connect to. I mean, I can, but I sort of don't want to. And in a way, some of that is just hard to connect to, period. But I was very lost, very confused. I still am. Unfortunately, I feel like I wish I was further along in some ways, but well, I don't know if that's true. But I was very, I had this notion in me, and a lot of it was ideologically driven. This was a point in time when I was much more ideologically driven, and I can even say, this feels a little bit harsh to say, but sort of captured with, I guess, generally what would be, you could think of as kind of the social justice, sort of radical left. Um, Identitarianism. I mean, the program that I was in, the social work program, was very explicitly social justice oriented. And I mean, this is part of a much bigger conversation, because I had started to drift in that direction many years prior to that. There's a way in which your experiences, college experiences in general, definitely now, definitely in the last 5 years, definitely in the last 10 years, but even, a little bit further back when I was in undergraduate, it was still, college, it was definitely more balanced. And I'm thankful for that. At the time that I was doing my undergraduate degree, it had not become so uh, trying to think of a good word here. It had not become so, I guess. Yeah, I'll just keep using the same word here. Ideologically fixated, ideologically captured, the way that it did, say, in the last 10 years. But again, I mean, it kind of reached a crescendo, but it's all part of a larger trajectory. So it depends on how far back I want to start, rewind this story. But definitely, I'd say from like 2009, kind of after I got out of my undergraduate years. But let's just say 2009 onwards, I had a big shift in the kind of peer group that I was around and got involved with. a group that was very activist oriented, and I've done other videos talking about this whole process, so I won't go into great detail here, but and so I was running that software, you could say, on one level. Now, I've had enough time out of that madness and done enough inner work and inner healing, and more than anything, found a depth dimension that has helped to relativize a lot of these kind of, I would say, subsidiary, maybe, or it's not like your political identity doesn't matter, but it's a relatively shallow dimension of your being. And but when you're not really connected or explicitly moving in that direction into a greater contact with God, with truth, with peace, um, you you can just get really out of whack. You can get really lost. And let me see what do I want to say here, because there's too many things in my brain right now. It's like I sort of want to give myself a little bit of grace with some of this, because really I was looking for truth, and it was like I was doing the best I could at the time. But when you don't have a connection to God, to truth, to that depth dimension, the transcendent, something absolute to help relativize this world, you can